Today on Earth Focus, nuclear accidents, where insurance falls short and why taxpayers may be left holding the bag. Miles Benson reports, coming up on Earth Focus.
An earthquake and tsunami struck Japan's Fukushima nuclear power plant. 3 reactors suffered a meltdown.
The Japanese government has raised the crisis level at the Fukushima-Daiichi nuclear power plant from 5 to 7.
The confirmed death toll continues to climb.
Hundreds of thousands fled the radiation. Many are still unable to return home. Property damages and cleanup costs may run over $250 billion.
The operator of the disabled Fukushima-Daiichi nuclear power plant has agreed to make provisional damage payments to residents living around the plant.
What if it happened in the United States? Who would pay? A catastrophe like Fukushima could erase all existing insurance protection under federal law. It makes the U.S. liability compensation system look grossly inadequate. There are 104 nuclear power plants in the U.S. spread across 31 states. They produce 20% of our electrical power. They all carry some insurance against a nuclear accident, but the combined total coverage is only $12.6 billion. Beyond that, Americans would be uninsured, or as the insurance industry puts it, naked.
If you have to evacuate a very large city, or tens or hundreds of thousands of people are displaced, and that there are very large areas of land that are rendered uninhabitable for tens to hundreds of years, it gets to the point where the estimation of the damages and the costs to the government become inestimable, incalculable.
Nuclear accidents are costly. Some experts say an extreme event here could cost as much as $500 billion or more.
My colleagues and I did a number of estimates based on the spent fuel catching fire at reactors, and some of these estimates went into the hundreds of billions of dollars.
So why is the liability cap for insurance only $12.6 billion if the actual cost of a disaster could be far greater?
Now, clearly after Fukushima, $12 billion doesn't look like nearly enough.
Raising the cap would be costly. The nuclear industry says $12.6 billion is enough because nuclear power is safe and the probability of a major accident low.
I think that the amount of coverage is adequate. We have seen that in the 3 Mile Island accident, the amount was far below the amount of coverage provided. We have no other experience in the United States of an accident that would reach the level of $12.6 billion. And none is expected given the strong safety standards enforced by the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
We have a very strong regulatory process, a set of regulations. We do inspections. We have a strong enforcement process to handle when regulations aren't being followed. And those things all combine, help to give us continued assurance that nuclear power is safe.
After Fukushima, steps were taken to review safety at U.S. nuclear plants.
Right now, we are a little bit more than 2/3 of the way through a 90-day review that we're doing to see if there are any immediate short-term issues that need to be addressed to deal with the events at Fukushima.
Fukushima reinvigorated this discussion of how NRC considers land contamination economic consequences within its regulatory framework, and also if the NRC would like to do anything differently in the future.
We're always looking for ways to improve the regulatory process and how we regulate the civilian uses of nuclear materials.
But some experts are concerned about safety and regulations. Today, U.S. nuclear power plants are aging. Built to last 40 years, more than half are at least 30 years old.
If we're going to have nuclear power, then we believe it has to be as safe and secure as possible. And we've been long concerned that neither in the United States or other countries is the regulatory infrastructure adequate to make sure nuclear plants are safe.
I think that there is reasonable assurance that we're never going to have a catastrophic accident of the magnitude of what happened in Japan.
But that doesn't mean it couldn't happen.
You know, it can be the black swan event. Low probability of occurrence, but high impact.
Today, 6 million Americans live within 10 miles of a nuclear plant, and 120 million live within 50 miles. But nobody can buy private insurance against damage to their property because of a radiation leak or other consequences of a nuclear accident. The nuclear industry was born in the 1950s when the U.S. government was determined to promote the civilian use of nuclear energy. President Dwight D. Eisenhower had a dream. He called it Atoms for Peace.
So my country's purpose is to help us move out of the dark chamber of horrors into the light, to find a way by which the minds of men, the hopes of men, the souls of men everywhere can move forward toward peace and happiness and well-being. It is not enough to take this weapon out of the hands of the soldiers. It must be put into the hands of those who will know how to strip its military casing and adapt it to the arts of peace.
Nuclear power was to benefit mankind, but the free market insurance industry was unwilling to cover nuclear accident risk because it was immeasurable and potential economic damages were incalculable. So to encourage and protect investment in nuclear power, Congress passed the Price-Anderson Act in 1957, which created an insurance pool and capped the amount of liability a commercial nuclear power plant would face should a disaster occur.
Well, the thinking that went into the creation of the Price-Anderson Act back in the 50s was that in the event of a catastrophic accident, no single utility would be able, from a financial standpoint, to withstand that kind of loss. But it was always designed primarily with the view that the accident would probably be the destruction of the physical facility itself, and it wasn't ever thought about, a catastrophic accident that went far beyond the plant's geographic borders and into the surrounding community.
When Price-Anderson was first adopted, there was $60 million of insurance and $500 million of United States government indemnity. The act was later amended to provide that all of the money would come from private sources. At the present time, the first tier is composed of insurance of $375 million. If that were not adequate, then each operator of the 104 nuclear power plants would be assessed about $111 million. This totals about $12.6 billion.
Anything beyond that is not covered by insurance, and it would be up to Congress to decide whether they wanted to appropriate the funds.
If we start talking about $400 or $500 billion, there is no way that any politician is going to vote for the public to take on that kind of liability.
You cannot tell Congress that in the future at some time they're going to have to pass a law to provide many, many more billions of dollars in case of a nuclear accident. That's a fairy tale.
I think we have a $16 trillion deficit right now. It would obviously probably have to be some kind of deficit financing with major implications for the economy and for maybe even the value of the dollar in the worst case of scenario in the world economy.
The way it works is that many of these reactors are now owned by multi-tiered holding companies that have layers and layers of what they call limited liability corporations beneath them. And each LLC basically represents a reactor and has no other assets. The whole concept of a limited liability corporation by virtue of its definition is to shield the parent corporation from liability. What happens under these corporate structures is that if such an accident of such great magnitude were to occur, these limited liability corporations could promptly declare bankruptcy and shield the parent corporation that leaves the taxpayer holding the bag to pay for the liability.
Only Congress, with the President's approval, can raise the mandated level of insurance coverage against nuclear accidents. There's been no sign they intend to do so, and the nuclear industry is quite happy with that.
It's sort of short-term greed. That what drives the industry more than anything is making as much money as quickly as possible and as long as possible without incurring any large expenses that would cut into their profits. It's that simple.
Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories. World news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.